Hey, we're glad that you're here with us today. We're going to talk about how do you take people that are attending or involved in whatever ministry are and turn them into leaders or turn them into owners. And for me, the paradigm for that has always been when Jesus taught about being the good shepherd. And, he goes, the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep, but then he goes, the hired hand cares nothing for the sheep. And as soon as the wolves come, the hired hand runs away. And I think a lot of times, if you're leading ministry or leading any kind of ministry, or even leading in a company, if you're just doing it with hired hands, you find whenever things get tough, people disappear. So to me, the secret has always been to try to turn people into owners. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that in our friends, life, and ministry session. Steve, when I say that, what comes to mind for you? Have you had experience seeing people become leaders and then really become owners of the ministry?
Well, one of the things when we discussed this topic as something that we would address today, I was thinking first you have to have people in order to try to get them to come. And I probably mentioned it a previous time, but in the first church plant that we did, no one came to the first service. And it was really a frightening time. And it was a time where I really had to decide how much I was going to trust God. I also made a commitment then that I was going to try to go out and, as a result of my effort in that community, bring someone to church that next week. And so that has always been a passion of mine with evangelism. And I do remember one time when we had people coming to the church. Now I'm speaking about the first church in River Falls, Wisconsin, that I found out that someone was going to be moving away. And I can remember having a talk with him. His name was Larry. And I asked him if he would try between now and the time he was going to have to leave, if he could replace himself. And so we had invested in each other's lives, but I really wanted to have another Larry, and he made that as a real effort. But you have to start with people, and as we discuss things today, I'll be real interested in hearing some of the things that you guys have to say, and then I'll share more as things come to mind.
Well,
Paul,
I always found if I led someone to Christ, it was much more likely they would volunteer and become a leader and even become an owner. Bill, how about you? What are some thoughts that come to your mind?
Well, I want to hear from you first, though, because one of my favorite lines from you was I asked you about your first church, and you were, what, 20 years old when you started your first church?
Yeah.
And I said, well, how did that happen? And do you remember what you said?
But just too dumb to not know I couldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah. And there was no evangelical church in that town, right?
Well, there one small one, but it was a needy town.
Yeah. And how did that go for you? I mean, because you started with nothing too.
Well, what I always would look at is I would look for people that were willing to serve. And then I would explain that the difference between serving and leading is when you got other people to do it with you. So would you try to get some people to do it with you? And then usually about a month into that, I would have a conversation with them and I'd say, now, it will get hard. And they go, what do you mean it will get hard? Well, these people that you've recruited will fail you. Some of them will fail you. Some of them will quit. Some of them won't show up on time. So how do you deal with failure? Because you have the option of quitting, and That's what people can do. I'm going to quit leading. Or you can get mean-hearted and try to kind of shame people into doing things. Or you can practice what it says in Revelation when it says, the book of Revelation, practice a patient endurance. Leaders need a patient endurance. Yeah. And what I always found, if a leader was willing to pay the price of the pain, then I could invite them to be an owner. And as an owner, I just said, I trust you with this whole area of ministry. I trust you with the whole thing. And I loved when I saw people that would kind of walk that pathway. So that was the pathway I used. How about for you, John?
I became a Christian in the Jesus People movement. And it was quite common in that movement that we would start something we would call posts. So from a center, people were sent out to start posts, which really you could compare to churches, reaching out, working on the streets and growing those posts as churches. And so everyone was always sort of involved on the same kind of level. Most people were. There was always, someone who was a leader, but never considered to be a pastor and so on. And so that same kind of experience, when we became part of Youth with a Mission, we started after a while, we understood that we were called to be involved in evangelism and church planting. We actually started to recruit people and told them, like, okay, we're going to, like, for example, we went to Japan and said, we're going to plant a church in Japan and in the Tokyo area. And so we asked them to give the same kind of commitment and say, like, be willing to come along, be willing to be there for at least a year. You pay your own expenses, and let's just see what happens. And that's what we have continued to do after that too. Also in the setting of Sweden, when we started planting churches there in the different sites we always started with nothing. We ask leaders to do it voluntarily and to recruit people on the same basis, and then to just see what would happen from there.
Yeah, I think sometimes pastors get it in their head that the real goal is to hire a lot of people to do things. But I found that I would say at least 50% of the people I've just hired, without them being part of the ministry, end up as hired hands. Right. They, as soon as anything is hard or it's difficult, they want to quit, or they want to back off. And so I think there's a real powerful thing if you can teach people to face the pain and battle through the pain. Does that make sense to you, Steve or Bill?
Yeah. I think that, the whole question or comment that you made in comparing the hired hand versus the shepherd, and you think about what the life of a shepherd was like. It was 100% devotion.
Yeah, risky.
And it's really hard to pay someone to do that. Now, when we started our first church, I was pastoring for 2 years in an interim role in another church. And I didn't expect to be offered a position there, but they offered it, and it was very generous. And the position where we started the first church, we were put into a position that God had to provide every month. That we received $600 a month total, and at that time we weren't allowed to raise support or do any of those other things. And yet we felt like we were supposed to be there. And I think that after hearing what you guys have said, I think that God was really wanting to see what would have been involved in terms of my willingness to be a true shepherd. And it's a really big thing. And people, oftentimes there are people that I talk to who want to be pastors, and and they describe what they want their pastoral ministry to be like, and it has nothing to do with sacrifice. And
a lot of times, nothing to do with people.
Right. Yeah, they want
an audience.
Yeah. I think what's hard in a small church when you're starting out is, generally speaking, in my lifetime, what you get in a church like that are a couple of strong families. And a lot of it is about control. A lot of it is about, they want to have impact and everything. And in my first church, which was about 60 people when I started, there was, like you say, I was making $500 a month. It was really a struggle just to live on that, with $250 a month in school loans to pay.
Yes.
And then a little 4-month-old baby when we started, and to try to do all of that. And then you just have to go out and start recruiting people. We didn't have anybody to play the piano. We had an organ, but nobody to play the organ. And to go out and just try to find out who would be willing to come and just be a musician, just so we'd have instruments, in the service on Sunday. And then there were people who had left the church because the pastor before me had split the church. The pastor before me was just a rude man. He would go into the stores in the city, and he would go in and look at the greeting cards. And if he thought one of the greeting cards was too sensational or sexual or inappropriate, he would rip the card in half and throw it on the floor. And he would just stand there going through all the greeting cards. So the people in town had such a low view of this church. And then when he left, they found that all these liquor bottles in the basement of the house, stored up in the eaves of the house. He was just a terrible pastor, and the church fell apart under his, and so then to try to rebuild and to show people that you were a solid person, you were committed, you had just come out of seminary, first church ever, and that your father was a pastor, and there were some good things, and just to even get him to come one time, and then to ask him to sign on, it just literally would take a year and a half just to recruit a good volunteer. So you're right. I think we need to tell people at the beginning, you really have to learn to recruit, to find the right kind of people, and to ask for, as John said, ask for financial commitment and support.
Yeah.
Yeah. What Paul said before was also really important, because you said, I found that the persons you led to the Lord that you discipled, those were the ones that wanted to buy in. And I think that's the key thing. I've very often been you count on people that have been sort of Christians for a while, and they have matured to a certain degree, you think. And so you think oh, these could be the people. Even in our teams, when we started churches, it's like, oh, this person could be a perfect, second leader or potential pastor or whatever. And I mean, just think about our first church that we intentionally planted in Tokyo area. The people that I had counted on, they left. They left, and it was two young women. They were 20 and 21 that took the leadership of the church when we went back to recruit a new team to plant yet another church in Japan. I was there. I went about 3 months a year. I went in total time. I went to be with them and to support them and to help them to grow the church. But two young women, 20 and 21.
If you're doing ministry, one thing to do is if you looked at yourself as being in the people development business, And if you just said, what's the career path for different that you could raise people up, even if by raising people up you work yourself out of a job, and you want to look for talented people, but even more, you want to look for people that are willing to pay a price, that have a servant spirit. I work twice a week in children's ministry. On Wednesday night, I work with now about 170 kids that come through my rotation. And then on Thursday morning, I work with, right now I'm work with 3-year-olds for 2.5 hours. Mm. And oftentimes, if I'm trying to train up a leader, I'll invite them to come and join me.
Yes.
In that. And they'll go, well, why are you doing this? I mean, this, and I go, it's good for my soul.
Yep. And you are technically retired. You are volunteering to be involved. And
Steve, none of us believe in retirement.
Right.
We're gonna keep working.
Yeah.
But you're right.
I wanted to emphasize it just makes my heart so proud of Paul.
Absolutely.
That he makes these little kids, and he acts like he's 20 and not 70, and he actually has one of our joint friends try to come and do it with him. And he was an athlete, and he's had a knee replaced and an ankle replaced. He's a great guy. And but he says, last time I was talking to him, he said, I don't understand how does your brother do this? And it really boils down to love. We weren't called to love just people in our socioeconomic level or educational level, or people that we find friendship to be easy, but we're to love everyone. Mm. If I could tag off of that a little bit, after we were married for 10 years, and so we were starting our fourth church, if you include this interim pastor thing in it. And we went to Hawaii on the island of Maui for where we had used credit card miles and everything else to get there. And we stayed in a kind of a dump, and we really didn't have a very good time. But we started to talk about kids ministry at a Subway restaurant. And I said, the church has gotten big enough that the kids walk right by me and they don't even know that I'm their pastor. They don't even have any idea who I am. And so we ended up coming up with this idea of starting something on Sunday night where I would gather some other adults, and Lynn would also be involved, and we would offer free babysitting to the parents for Sunday night. And we called it Outburst. And so we had a song written about it, and the whole goal was just that I would have an opportunity, and at this time I was in my mid-20s, I would have an opportunity, I would have to have been 30, to wrestle around and play with these kids. And it was so wonderful what happened as a couple months went by, because we had this small lobby, but now when the kids came by, they all grabbed me, and it made me so happy. And so your whole point about love and caring for people and serving, Doug or Paul, I think is just so very important. And it just brought back this flood of memories where I really had a lot of joy, and by just focusing it in a different direction.
See, I think we would be helped a lot if there were more stories told about sacrifice and loving people. And really, that's where if you're trying to develop staff or develop high level leaders, it's if you get them loving God and loving people, there's not, you're 90% there in that process.
And you don't have to just go out and hire everybody.
Yeah.
I just would say two things, though. One is, I think looking back now, if I had been smarter when I started, I would have been like John in Japan. I would have asked some people I knew to support me, like a missionary almost, going to this church, so that I would have had a decent level of support just to meet our basic expenses for food and stuff. And the other thing is, I've learned over my life that I always had to be careful as a pastor when I did stuff with kids. I always have to have people there. There's always people who are suspicious of why does the pastor want to be with the kids all the time. And I always had to protect myself by having people around, making it real clear to everybody that this is just something I'm doing for spiritual purposes. So I would just tell young people, especially as you're just starting out, just be aware of that. It's easy to get somebody just to be there with you.
Bill,
that's really wise advice. We've kind of come to the end of our time, and we want to thank you for listening, watching. Subscribe, please. And if you have any questions,
it doesn't cost anything to subscribe.
What was that, Bill?
It doesn't cost anything to subscribe.
Yeah. And if you ask us a question, one of us will try to answer. And we really care about the opportunity to help and encourage you. So thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.